Okay, it looks like we are live. I'm going to bob over to the page and make sure that we actually are live. So bear with me for just a moment. I see the chat room is open. All right, thank you everybody for your patience. So we are here today to talk about discussion boards, and this discussion is going to kind of try to function on a couple of levels. I'm recording this webinar, first of all, for my students in a nursing teaching with technology course, and I think I have at least one of those folks watching right now, so hey, shout out to anybody from that class. But I'm also going to talk kind of generically about discussion boards, so hopefully you can get even if you're not part of that class, you're going to be able to get something out of it. And we're going to workshop, look at a couple discussion board assignments, and kind of talk about ways to make them even better. So the whole background for this particular topic in this webinar is that the students in this class were supposed to create discussion board assignments, and it's a nursing course. I'm not a nurse, so I couldn't actually respond to their prompts, but I wanted to give them some feedback because I saw a lot of really good things and a lot of things, kind of the same things that could have been improved. So that's what we're going to talk about. I don't have any slides to show with this. I've got some documents that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show a lot of my face, and you get to see the wonderful Connor playing the silent piano as we go ahead and go through this. But to begin with, oh, and I should also say this is going to last kind of maximum 20 minutes max. So this is going to be nice and short and sweet. We're going to be really just talking about what I think are the 3 layers to a really successful discussion board assignment. And for people watching who aren't in the class, I'm talking about in higher ed or in a learning management system like a Blackboard or a D2L or a Canvas or a Moodle, creating those discussion assignments. And what does it take? What are the 3 levels or the 3 layers of posts that are really successful in that format? So that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen over so that you can see my screen. And I'm going to pull up a couple different documents. Nope, not that one. Sorry. Bear with me here. There we go. Okay. So the 3 levels that we're going to talk about are listed on here. I'm going to go back to my face now that I've got that pulled up. But the 3 levels that we're going to talk about, the first one is selecting a topic. There we go. Selecting a topic for your discussion board. The text that the students had to read talked a lot about this, and frankly, everybody did a really good job of selecting a good topic. We'll talk more about it briefly, but then we're going to dive into the next 2 topics, or the next 2 layers. The second layer is making sure to pick a question that can only be done on the discussion board, and that you're not accidentally writing an essay question or a report research kind of paper question. And then the third layer is getting the logistics right. So making sure that you're directing students in the way that they need to. So before we dive in, I'm just going to bop over to the chat and see if Connor, my kiddo is hitting buttons. There we go. Here, Jen, if you have any questions, go ahead and just type them in the chat. But yeah, otherwise we're going to dive right in. So the first thing that the textbook talks about is picking a good topic for a discussion. And they list things like topics that evoke an emotional response, topics where students can bring in their own life experiences, telling a story. Those are all really, really great places to start. And out of the posts in class, everybody did a really, really good job with this layer of having posts that were on topics that were really, really interesting and really evocative and really good storytelling. Where we start to fall short then is on the second and third layers. So the second layer, and this is what we're going to dive into, about making sure that you're telling a story that can only be told, or asking something that can only be done via the discussion board and is not a essay question in disguise. So a quick story about this, or a metaphor. I got my master's degree in a music school, and so I was around a lot of performers. And when you're in the performers world, one thing that you hear said a lot is to aspiring performers is, if you can think of anything else you would be happy doing in life, do that. And the reason they say that, I'm sure there's lots, and that whether or not it's true is to be debated. But the reason, the way it ties into the discussion board, is that I think if you can come up with any other tool to serve the purposes of this prompt that you're going to create, use that other tool. If any other tool is going to work, use that, because it's really hard to get discussion board posts right. It's really hard to go through all these layers that we're talking about to really make an effective discussion board. I think it's worth it when you can get it. But if you're, oftentimes if you're just looking for something quick, or what everybody's first instinct is going to be to do is to ask for an essay or ask for a research paper, and you're not actually asking for a discussion. So let's workshop that a little bit. I got permission from one of the students in class to pull up her. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my screen. And here we go. And you can see here in bold, let me make this nice and big. This person had a prompt that was about compliance as being a qualifying characteristic of individuals who are set to receive organ transplants. And I thought this was just an incredibly evocative question, probably because I know somebody that's had an organ transplant, so that might be the reason why I picked this particular thing. But also the person that responded to it, the first thing they said was, what an interesting question. So I think it's a really good example of nailing that first layer of having a really good topic. Where I think we can improve on this, and where we're going to workshop it, is the question at the very end. So I'm going to highlight that here, and it says, explain the role a nurse contributes to addressing patient compliance and methods to improve compliance. Discuss the ethics to consider when approving or denying someone for a transplant based off their history of compliance. I think this is an outstanding essay question prompt. If this was a Dropbox prompt where the students had to write a short little paper and upload it to the Dropbox, I think it would be perfect. I think as a discussion board prompt, I think we can do better. I think we can figure out a way to make this even more of a discussion. So we're going to get more back and forth and more engagement with our students. So there's two ways that you can do this, in my opinion. There's an article I will link that comes from, I want to say, Florida State, where they talk about Bloom's taxonomy, and they say that really discussion board posts should only hit on the top 2 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So the creation of new things and the evaluation of existing things, like, is it good or bad? To kind of tighten with that, the way I like to think about it is I like to think about the 2 C's. And having discussion board questions that do one of 2 things. Either evoke conflict, so something where, not necessarily that there's going to be a fight, but something where students, there's going to be opposing forces. I think that's really important. I'm going to switch this back over to my face. So I think having opposing forces, the first C being conflict, is really important. So if you can come up with a way to do that, rather than just asking students to explain something, because you're not going to get a lot of different answers there. Oftentimes, if you have students explain, there's going to be a right answer, and then everybody else just kind of chimes in and does variations on a theme. And unless that's the goal that you're wanting, try to see if you can think of a way to evoke some conflict. And I'll give some examples of how I might suggest doing that in a second. The other thing that I think discussion boards do really well is, the other C is crowdsourcing. So conflict or crowdsourcing. And what I mean by crowdsourcing is asking your students to provide things where you know they're not all going to say the same thing. For example, one example that I thought with this assignment is, can you come up with a scenario where you wouldn't want to take compliance into consideration when determining if somebody was a good candidate for an organ transplant? Asking them to, that's that top level of Bloom's, asking them to come up with, create something that sort of shows their understanding of the item. As far as the conflict one, let me pull up, I've got just a couple of examples. Let me go back to my screen share here for just a second. I know. Okay, so as far as Options for doing that. To evoke a little bit of conflict with this without, obviously you don't want to bang out brawl. But here, make a provocative statement and ask your students to respond. So ask them if they agree or disagree with a statement like, compliance is the most important factor that should be considered in this circumstance, or compliance shouldn't be considered, or something like that. Another option would be to do a case study, maybe where there are two patients that are very similar up for an organ transplant, but are different in terms of compliance and who should get the transplant. So something where you're sort of going to evoke some different answers. And you might even go so far as to assign students to take on different roles as in a debate. So some for, some against, but really getting that discussion going rather than just asking students to explain something when you're going to get very similar answers. The third example that I have here is that what I mentioned before, asking students to hypothesize scenarios. So really looking at those top two levels of Bloom's, making students choose between equally good or bad options, and also making them create new things that sort of show their understanding. Again, we're just looking for ways that the discussion board is the only possible option that we could have. It couldn't be an essay. It couldn't be a quiz or something like that. It has to be a discussion because we want that back and forth with students. We want to get the conflict or the crowdsourcing or whatever other element that only a discussion board can provide. So that's layer number 2. Layer number 3, I've got a worksheet that I will share, and because it's really easy to forget parts of layer number 3. And layer number 3 is the logistics. I've read a blog post where they referred to it as traffic, directing traffic for your students. And it's saying things like, what is the due date of posting your initial post? Or what do I need to put in the subject line? Or what do I need to do specifically when I respond? Not just telling them respond to 3 people, but saying, what do I specifically need to do? So I'm going to switch it over. I'm going to show you this worksheet really quick. And this is the third layer that I wanted to show you for discussion boards. We're going to go to, I believe this one. Let's see. Yeah. All right. So what we're looking at here is a worksheet that I'll make available. It's what I use when I'm creating discussion board assignments, because honestly, it's really easy to forget elements that your students need to know because it seems kind of obvious to you. One disclaimer with this is that you may be giving out these directions kind of at the beginning of the class, and they might apply to all of your discussion board assignments. So some of this you may be able to share once for the class and not have to share with each assignment. But if it's going to be different each assignment, you're going to want to answer these 6 questions. So the 6 questions, you can see here the first one, what is the purpose of the assignment? What will the students have accomplished? The second one, what knowledge or information should the post be based on? And this is where if you're telling a story or you're doing a case study, you would include that. This would be where you would tell your students, this is going to be based on your own life. Come up with 3 examples from your own life. Whatever you want them to pull their answer from, you give that in number 2. Number 3, do the students need to read any existing posts previously shared by their classmates? Or there is a must post first setting that D2L has where this is telling them you're not going to see anybody else's answers until you post. Number 4, describe the parameters of the desired response. This is where that traffic piece comes in. How long should their response be? What tone should they have? What goes in the subject line? This is really the directing traffic sort of piece. What do you want to see specifically in that post? Number 5, when is the initial post due? And then number 6, are replies required? And if so, all of these questions about what goes into a reply. Very often I just see reply to 3 classmates. And it doesn't really say why or how or what your response is supposed to do. So get specific about that. What I've got on this worksheet is a little chart you can use. And I've also got some examples of some sample discussion board assignments that are numbered with those 6 parts. So I will share that and make that available. Just to give you a quick example, here's a resource share assignment. We're telling students what the objective is, and we're going through all of those options. Again, I will make this available to anybody after the fact. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I've got a little one who's getting real tired, and we're almost at the 20-minute mark anyway. I'm going to bop over and see if there's any questions. Oh, Karen is here. Tracy is here. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining in. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the box. That's really the content that I have. For the people that are in my class, like I told the folks that were there in person, I thought everybody did a really good job of coming up with really good topics for discussion. And it was that second and third layer where I felt like things could have been improved. And so if you are in my class, you're free to add another reply to your post where you rewrite it, including a little bit more of that information. Excuse me. And if you have questions about that, just shoot me an email. For anybody not in my class, if you have questions about discussion boards, Connor here and I would be happy to answer them. But I'm going to go ahead and log off now. And if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.